You have to unlock your keyboard before you turn mine on.
You're good to go anytime.
Yeah, you probably have to unlock the keyboard.
We'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Kurt,
He's excused.
John Holt,
Here.
John Heverlet,
Here.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
and Mark.
Here. Okay, now it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting in November.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Havlicek. Is there any amendments to this or changes to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll? Or not the roll, just everybody that wants to approve the minutes from that meeting, just say aye.
Aye.
Aye? Okay, they're approved. Now we need a motion to approve or amend today's meeting agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Strand to approve today's meeting agenda. Is there any amendments anybody would like to make? Will, all in favor of approving it like it is, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the meeting agenda for today is set. Okay, next on the agenda, public hearings and bid awards. The first thing under that item is non-compliance hearing on dangerous building at 1011 Wrangell Avenue. The borough's building official has deemed the building at 1011 Wrangell Avenue as dangerous. At this time, the Assembly will take testimony on the matter. Toward the end of this meeting, the Assembly will consider the issuance of an order to repair, vacate, or demolish the building. And the process to be used for this hearing is listed in the agenda, but I'll go through it very quickly. Presentation of report by the building official, and I believe it'll be the manager will be doing that. Presentation of facts and argument by the property owner, Mr. Treve or Mr. Ellingstead, or Miss Ellingstead. Testimony by any other interested parties, and that will be at the discretion of the mayor to determine if they're interested parties or not. So if you're within the 600-foot area, probably that you were sent a notice, and if you want to reply, you can. Written comments received will be read into the record for people that aren't in town. And any response from the building officials will be after that, and then any response and a final argument by the property owners. Each of the items in the foregoing hearing format could be followed by questions by Assembly members. There'll be no cross-examination of anybody asking questions of the people giving testimony. So with that being said, I believe it's the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to read into the record the report that was done by Leo Luzak, our Community Development Director. History. The foundation of the dwelling located at 1011 Wrangell Avenue completely failed in September of 2009. The building shifted downhill, and consequently the floor joists are sitting in direct contact with the wet muskeg soils. Since that time, I have been attempting to work with Karen Ellingstad and also with the contractors that contacted my office to discuss the situation. I told Karen Ellingstad and the contractors that I would need to see a plan for correcting the situation along with a firm timeline. On June 21st, 2012, I formally notified Karen Ellingstad that the structure at 1011 Wrangell Avenue had been determined to be a dangerous building. I posted the property with the notice and gave her, as the owner of the property, 30 days to come into compliance. On July 25th, 2012, Karen Ellingstad requested a 30-day extension. After I granted the extension, on September 9th, 2012, Karen Ellingstad applied for a building permit to replace the foundation of the structure, and I told her that I could not process the permit as the permit application did not include any plans describing how the repairs were to be made. The permit application is still pending as no construction plans have been submitted. I continued meeting with Karen Ellingstad to discuss the situation and also with her contractor, Joshua Adams, to review ideas he had for possible solutions. In the summer of 2013, Joshua Adams stopped in my office to tell me that he had given up on the project. On June 26, 2013, I once again sent notice that I had determined that the structure on 1011 Wrangell Avenue to be a dangerous building. On July 25, 2013, Karen Ellingstad once again asked for a 30-day extension. I denied the request as had no plan for coming into compliance and no firm time frame. On September 27, 2013, I requested that the Borough Assembly schedule a non-compliance hearing regarding the dangerous building located at 1011 Wrangell Avenue. I put a public notice on the property to that effect and also notified all property owners within 600 feet of the dangerous building. Current violations of Borough Code. As the building official for the Petersburg Borough, I've determined that the dangerous building at 1011 Wrangell Avenue has the following violations. Under 9.20.010 of the dangerous building in the municipal code, all buildings or structures which have any or all of the following defects shall be deemed dangerous buildings. Those which, exclusive of the foundation, show 33% or more of damage or deterioration of supporting member or members, or 50% of damage or deterioration of the non-supporting enclosing or outside walls or covering. When the piling foundation failed, the house shifted downhill and settled unevenly. The exterior walls have a pronounced list. The condition of the interior walls is unknown. Considering the lack of foundation and supports, the floor and roof loads lack proper support and are not safe to be used as a dwelling. In addition, those which have become are so dilapidated, decayed, unsafe, unsanitary, or which so utterly fail to provide the amenities essential to decent living that they are unfit for human habitation or are likely to cause sickness or disease so as to work injury to the health, moral, safety, or general welfare of those living therein, so the effect on the public. The structure has no water or sewer connections and therefore does not meet minimum borough requirements for habitation. The structure has no light or sanitation facilities and is uninhabitable. The front porch area is subject to collapse and could injure anyone attempting to enter the structure. Definition I, those which, because of their condition, are unsafe, unsanitary, or dangerous to the health, morals, safety, or general welfare of the people of the city. The dilapidated condition of the structure presents a hazard to the public and surrounding properties. The collapse of the foundation has caused the deterioration of the neighborhood and negatively impacted the surrounding property owners. And then definition J, those buildings existing in violation of any provision of the building code of the city or any provision of the fire prevention code or any ordinances of the city. The pile foundation failed in November of 2009, and since that time the floor of the structure has been in direct contact with the wet muskeg soils. The 2009 International Residential Code requires the following. IRC Chapter 4 requires that the structure be placed on an approved foundation. IRC 317.11 requires a minimum separation of 18 inches between untreated floor joists and the surface of the ground. IRC 408.1 requires underfloor ventilation to protect against decay. The required 18-inch clearance in ventilation is not provided as the foundation has collapsed. IRC 311.3 requires that floors and landings are inquired egress doors not be more than 1.5 inches below the top of the threshold. The front of the entryway is collapsed and there is no proper egress to the structure. Recommendations. Considering the violations detailed above and the fact that the structure has been resting on the damp ground since 2009 with no attempt to address the situation, I am requesting that the Borough Assembly determine that the structure at 1011 Wrangell Avenue is a dangerous building. I request that the Borough Assembly issue an order to the owner that the structure be repaired, vacated, or demolished within 30 days of this determination. Should the structure not to be brought up into compliance within the 30-day period, I am further requesting that the Borough Assembly cause the dangerous building and the other debris located at 1011 Wrangell Avenue to be demolished and disposed of at the owner's expense. Leo Luzak, building official. I'd like to kind of some of the supporting documents that go along with this history. First is there's copies in your packet of the 2009 International Residential Code 317.11, 408.1, and 311.3. These discuss the issues mentioned in the letter about the wood joists being in contact with the floor and the egress portions of the building and the ventilation side of it. Also in your packet is the copy of the Petersburg Municipal Code Chapter 9.20, Dangerous Buildings. 9.20.010 are the definitions that I was referring to. Definition of the dangerous building, special notice to, number E, number I, and number J that we talked about, which is the impact on people living in the home, the impact on the public and the neighbors, and items that are in violation of building code. Also, there's a copy of the June 26, 2013 notice that was sent to Mr. Treem. The October 16, 2013 notice, which was the first notice of hearing to take place on December 2nd. There's a copy of the November 7th, 2013, which Mr. Treem responded asking for a delay or reschedule of the hearing. Comment from a letter response from Leo Luzak on November 18th, 2013, notice with the receipt notification that the borough was willing to reschedule to December 16th, if not to move forward with the December 2nd meeting date. The borough did not receive a response from the owners by the Wednesday, November 27th deadline, and therefore decided to have them, went with the letter and have the meeting, public hearing today. The last is a copy of the 2006 through 2013 tax assessments showing a value decrease over that period of 56.5%. In 2006, the building was valued at $61,000. In 2013, the building has been valued at $26,500, showing a over 56% decrease in value. That's important as it refers back to the international building codes, where we see substantial decrease in the value of the property due to neglect. And that is the report from our building official.
Okay, does anybody on the assembly have questions of the manager in his presentation? Okay, we'll move on to the next part of the process here, and that's the presentation of facts and argument by a property owner. I see Mr. Treem is with us today. Fred, could you step to the podium and use the microphone, please, so people on the listening on the radio can hear you, please?
Could you repeat that about the radio?
Just speak in the microphone if you could.
Okay, can I move it a little closer?
Yeah, I don't know if it's working on that.
I'll get for it.
Okay.
I'm not a particularly loud guy, but I'll try to be. Objection sustained. Well, good afternoon. I'm Fred Treem. I'm the proud husband of the property owner, Karen Ellingstead. My dear bride purchased this house, I think about 25 years ago. I'm not sure the date. She bought it from Dr. Dobbins, and we moved in there. We've had 2 children. One of them died at birth, and the other has been raised to adulthood and is off in the nation's capital in graduate school. And she grew up in the house, and we liked the house. And we do not want to destroy the house. We want to repair it and return it to its original condition, or if not the condition in which it was built, at least to satisfy the requirements of the code. Let me just add an aside about Karen, because as I said, Karen is the original owner. I think she later added my name to the title by a quitclaim deed to create a tenancy by the entirety, and that's simply an estate planning device, so that when a husband and wife own property jointly and one of them predeceases the other, as one spouse usually does, the survivor owns the property, but it's really her house. And Karen would like to be here today, and she would have been here, but she lives in Wisconsin, or lived in Wisconsin, grew up in Wisconsin, and her 4 siblings had a family reunion over the Thanksgiving holiday. Now, back on the 27th of September, the minutes of the Borough Assembly meeting reported that we would have our hearing in mid-November, and so Karen went ahead and made her plans to attend that family reunion, and she did. And she's actually in the Minneapolis airport as we speak on her heading back to Petersburg, but she was not able to accelerate her travel, and I think she would like to be here. So I wrote a letter to Leo and asked him to postpone the hearing. One reason I had was that I have a court trial that has been since postponed. We were not able to accommodate Leo's suggestion that we postpone the meeting to the 16th because I have a 2-day trial that begins at 9 o'clock the next morning in Juneau, involving a Petersburg resident, and there was no way that I could attend a meeting here on Monday night and be in Juneau the next morning. So the 16th was not a good day, or not possible for us to attend. So I'm here today, but I just want to explain that Karen would like to be here, and I think that she deserves a right to stand here as the owner and explain to you why the house should not be demolished. So my suggestion is that the Borough Assembly should either recess this hearing or continue it until a time when the owner can be here. But I'm willing to at least explain, or attempt to explain, what I think the reasons are why the building is not a dangerous building. And I brought a little prop here, and I've got my colored tags that I don't need. But this prop it's a box, and even though this surface is slightly angling, I think we can see what I'm going to do here. And of course I'll put it this way, the two boxes, they're Band-Aid boxes, are meant to be the pilings. And what happened to the house is that the pilings keeled over and the house landed on top of them. And the house is now down, sitting on the pilings sideways rather than up and down. That's the inexorable force of gravity, but the house has fallen as far as it can. It's not going to go any further. So whatever potential energy it had when it was up in the air has now been dissipated, and it's down on the ground. It's not a dangerous building. I can tell you what is a dangerous building, and I can think of examples. If you had a building in which someone was storing a poisonous gas like ammonia or chlorine, if the gas escaped, the gas could leave the boundaries of the property, the area owned by the property owner, here Karen Ellingstead, and you can drift into someone else's yard and would pose a danger. But this building down on the ground poses, there's gravity for you. This building poses no danger to the neighbors. Now I concede that the neighbors might not like it, and I think that every property owner would like to be living in the Hamptons or in Chevy Chase, Maryland, surrounded by property of great value. But the simple truth is that Karen has the right, as a property owner, to do within the boundaries of her property what does not adversely affect or pose a danger to neighbors. And this house does not pose a danger to any of the neighbors. So what I want to suggest is that that we reach some kind of an agreement by which the contractor can perform his work. And the contractor is here with me today, Joshua Adams of Aardvark Construction Company in Juneau. And I think that, I'm not going to speak for Mr. Adams, but I think that if he comes here to this table, the stand if you will, he will countervail or disagree, contradict the statement read by the city manager, the borough manager, I hope that's not mine, my cell phone. The contractor did not say he was giving up on the job, quite the contrary. I mean, I've been in touch with him, and he's never told me he's going to give up on it, and he's here today in support of my request that he do the work. So he submitted an application to the building inspector, Mr. Luzak, and the application has not been granted, but that does not mean that he does not want to do the work. I think that the nature of the work will require doing the same thing that I did years ago at what is Petersburg's oldest building house at the corner of First and Fram. That building also met the same fate that the building on Wrangell Avenue met, and maybe I just have bad luck in pilings, but remember the pilings there collapsed and the building heeled over, sat on the ground, and Eli Lucas went in and put steel beams underneath it and raised it up, moved it off. We drove pilings and moved it back on again. The process did not proceed with the same dispatch or quickness that Leo would have liked, and we ended up, unfortunately, in an expensive piece of litigation over it. But the building is back up on pilings now, and actually it's warm and heated and toasty, and I'm living in it, and so is Karen. So some people make fun of me because they say, well, why don't you just tear down these old buildings? And for example, there was people in the city government that wanted us to tear down the building at First and Fram. And being that it's the oldest building in Petersburg, built in 1902, makes it one of the oldest buildings in Alaska. And we refused to do that. Now, the building on Wrangell Avenue is not that old, but it's also an old building. And, you know, some people collect old guns, and some people like old stamps or old cars. Well, we like old buildings. And I think the city should promote historic preservation in our community instead of having buildings torn down just because people don't like them or the neighbors don't like them. I'm sure the neighbors would like to have a lot of nice new houses there, but one of the problems with this notion of tearing down buildings is not only the obvious loss of revenue to the city, the tax revenue, but we end up with a city that looks like Dresden or Nagasaki. It's got a bunch of vacant lots. You have only to look downtown here and see how many vacant lots. In lot 38, which is where my office building is at First and Fram, there are 8 separate lots, and I think 1, 2, 3 of them are vacant. And the square footage of those is probably 25%, a third of the percentage of the area in the lot. And the city's not getting any tax revenue from that other than from the land itself, which has a lesser value when it's not improved. So I appeal to your sense of economy that the city should want to help people to preserve historic buildings rather than tear them down. And when I tried to get support for repairing the historic building at First and Fram Street, the city would have no part of it. In fact, at one point, I even offered to give the building and the lot to the city if the city would repair it. And that's not a preposterous idea. The oldest building in the city of the city of Anchorage was built in 1914, which makes it a young pup compared to our building up here. And the city of Anchorage undertook all the repairs. Now, I'm not asking you to give me a loan or to give me a gift, but I do suggest that collectively our community's interest would be promoted if I'm allowed to repair the building and the city cooperates with me, at least by refraining from demolishing the building. And there's another aspect of it. Not only will the city save or preserve its income from the tax revenue, but a demolition of a building like this is going to be a very expensive process for the city because there will be all kinds of legal battles over this, and the city has engaged me in 4 separate lawsuits since I came here as a young man in 1979 over the building at First and Fram, and the building is still there, and I'll suggest that that's either a tribute to the wisdom of our legal system or perhaps to the tenacity of the owners. And I predict that we'll see the same kind of tenacity on Wrangell Avenue. This little box that I had, this little box may be useful for another device too. Imagine what we'd have to do if we had the city treasurer. I'm getting out of my wallet here, a bunch of money here. And imagine how many $100 bills you'd have to put into this box and have the city clerk, city treasurer send this to the city attorney in Juneau. And the city has wasted an enormous amount of money in the past in litigation over buildings. And I appeal to you, do not waste more money. If the city wants to spend some money, I can think of 2 things that this money should be spent for, not tearing down my building and engaging in a futile lawsuit over it. First of all, right under our hands here is the police department. And when I came here in 1978, Bob Parrington was the chief of police, and Dick Tito was the mayor. They were engaged in an awful brouhaha. And I had some of my first clients were in the jail here, and I went to see them. And the jail was an awful mess. And you know, it's even worse now. That's where our money should be spent. And the other thing, can you just indulge me with one more sentence? The other place where this money could be spent, instead of putting it in the box and sending it to the city attorney, let's just fix the bridge out here, because that bridge it's an awful, you could drive a small car over it and lose your axle. So what I'm going to suggest is that what we should do is we should compromise. And here's the compromise that I suggest. Let Mr. Adams here, we'll ask him if you want to, whether he told Leo he was quitting, but I'm sure he did not. But he's not quitting, he is here, he'll do the work, and I think we need to give him sufficient time to do it. And here's the bargain. I'll stick my hand out and offer a handshake with the council and with my neighbors. Mr. Adams will complete either the repair of the building, or if he cannot be repaired, we will remove it by Labor Day. That's the offer I make to you. And I suggest that's fair. The building is not posing any danger to the neighbors in the meantime. The roof line is a couple inches lower, well, maybe a couple of feet lower than it used to be. When you drive by Wrangell Avenue, it's still the same house. It's just a little lower down, and we'll prop it back up again. We'll repair it and restore it and put it on pilings. Or if that's not able to be done, then we'll remove the building, and we'll do it by Labor Day. And there's only one condition that I ask, and that is a condition of my offer, is that the city must return or restore the electric power. When the building fell off the foundation, when the foundation collapsed, the city electric department went out and terminated the power, and then we asked that it be restored so that we could go into the building, have light, have electricity to use power tools, and it was hooked up for quite a while. And then Mr. Nelson, unilaterally on his own, decided, no, you're not going to have any more power, and he just went out without giving us any notice and just removed the meter. And when my wife complained that she cannot see to work in there, he said to her, infamously, get a flashlight. Well, my request is that the city abandon that kind of nasty petulance and cooperate. I'm asking for some cooperation, and the minimum cooperation is two things. Number one, we got to have electricity, and number two, that building permit application that's been sitting up here needs to be issued. So that's my request, and thank you very much for hearing me. Good afternoon.
Do members have any questions of Mr. Treem?
Yes.
Mr. Hoag.
Fred, don't go anywhere. Back to the mic.
Oh, okay. Okay. Back to the mic.
Back to the mic.
Okay.
I got actually 4, but I think I'll start with the first. If there's no objection from the rest of the assembly, why don't you just represent to us what Karen would say if she was here? I'm confident you got a pretty good idea of it.
Well, I could summarize it in one sentence, and that is, she wants to repair the building and does not want it to be destroyed. But I think she should be allowed to address you and give you her own feelings as a wife and mother who raised children in the house and what it means to her, why it's important. Those are things that you should hear from her, not from me. I mean, I admit I'm her spouse, but I think she should be allowed to address you directly. And I think that you should want to hear from her. So that's why I'm saying if you're not willing to accept the suggestion I'm making, and that is let's just set a deadline of Labor Day and be done with it, then adjourn this proceeding until a time when Karen can attend. And she cannot attend on the 16th.
All right, number 2, if I may go ahead, Mr. Mayor. The statement from Leo, the building official, is that and I'm looking at the second page of it, about 3/5 down. It says the pile foundation failed in November 2009. Since then, the floor of the structure has been in direct contact with wet muskeg soils. Are you saying that's not accurate? It's just sitting on old pilings and not...
Sitting on old pilings.
Anybody got any photos?
No, because we'd have to go underneath the floor. We'd have to drill holes in our wood floor to do that. But
Does anybody have any... I mean, is the outside of it? It seems to me you could look at the outside of the building and say whether it's in contact with the muskeg or not.
no.
Looking at the outside of the building, you really can't see because the siding is linked. What's that? Oh, Joe Bertignoli. I'm building inspector, work maintenance for the city. looking around the perimeter of the building, you really can't see under the building from the exterior because the fact that it is laying down right on the ground, there's no skirting left, and the siding is in direct contact with the
So you're
with the
telling me
soils.
this,
I don't know how you could see under the building unless you could see it through the floor within the
is
building.
the siding on the outside in direct contact with
Yes.
the ground? Fred, do you dispute that?
Yes.
You do dispute that?
Well, this isn't
Well,
a dispute.
No,
Well, if
no, I'm
we're
not-
looking for facts.
Mr. Hope, we're going to follow this format.
Yeah.
And so let's just ask your question, and how are we going to get proof of this, sitting here asking, one says it is in contact, one says it isn't in contact. I don't think we're going to get a direct answer for that sitting here today, but go ahead and ask your question.
All right, well, Mr. Mayor, if I may digress then, this hearing could be, we got a long meeting today. I would be interested in seeing a quick digital photograph as to whether it's in contact or not. But moving on, number 3, you said Mr. Adams has made an application. Is this the application that is referred to in this document that Ms. Ellingson put in, but there were no diagrams, or did he make a second application?
I do not know the answer to that.
All right, he's here.
He's here, but Karen is not, and she's the one that would know that.
Okay.
Karen has made all the, if you will, discussions and contacts with Leo.
Okay,
So I do
Fourth
not know.
question, Fred, last one. Why until Labor Day? Your house has been sitting on the ground for 4 years. It's not improving in value sitting on the ground this way. Why should the borough consider all the way to Labor Day and say, why can't you do it in 30 or 60 days?
Simply, I think primarily because of weather conditions and the contractors need to mobilize the equipment. So, and I think it's a project that will take more than just 30 days. I mean, I think of the boat harbor. I mean, how long did it take us to build the boat harbor? I mean, years. I mean, it's not a project that can be done in 30 or 60 days. But I think it can be done by Labor Day, and I'm willing to pledge on my sacred honor that it'll be done by that date. And that's the compromise I offer.
Yes.
I just have one question for you, Fred. Since the building inspector noted that the building had shifted and denied your permit, he said he wanted to see a plan for correcting the situation along with a firm timeline. Do you now have a plan with a firm timeline, and do you intend to submit it?
I think I'll have to ask Mr. Adams if he has a written plan. I know that we have an oral plan. He has communicated to me and explained to me what his plan is. And I'm not sure what the diagram would be, because the building would be, it's a footprint of approximately 20 by 35 or something like that. And it'll just go back in the same place. I mean, it's a narrow lot, so there's not any latitude about where we can move it. I mean, it has to go back pretty much where it is. So if we took a diagram, and there is such a diagram, happily, in the,
I don't think he's asking for a floor plan. It's a plan for correcting the situation along with a firm timeline that you intend to adhere to.
okay. All right, well, then I think the word plan does not mean a plan like a floor plan or a diagram plan. It would be a written chronology of events. I think, is that how we should interpret the word plan in Leo's comment?
Joe, were you referring to a foundation plan?
What I think we're asking for is how he intends to get this house up and what it's going to look like when it's up. Basically, are you planning on digging down the hard pan, putting piling stubs in there, putting, capping these things in concrete? How is it intended? What's the foundation going to be when you're done? Are the beams, and then once it gets inspected, is the beams that are existing that are laying on the ground now, are they rotten now?
Are they what?
Rotten. I mean, that's all going to have to get inspected. But what we were asking for is a sketch. Doesn't have to be, an engineered design sketch, but we can approve it. We need to see something of a plan of what that foundation is going to be. Pilings, concrete, dig to hard pan, bracing, and the whole, elevations.
Well, I think with Joe's guidance, I think Mr. Adams is here and he's listening to this, and the answer to Cindy's question is yes, we'll provide that kind of a plan. Yeah, I understand what you mean now, yes.
May I interject? Joe, am I correct in saying that the reason the electricity was unhooked was it became a dangerous situation? I mean, do you remember the house?
Yes, that's correct. Can you, yeah, so,
Sorry.
that was it. So it's on the record and people listening can hear.
My name is Joe Nelson. I'm the power superintendent. I'm also the city electrical inspector, or the borough electrical inspector. The electricity was left on after the house collapsed. They put up a construction service, basically. And then I watched it over time, and as the years went by, there was no construction activity. Typically, a construction service is up for about 6 months, and then they move it from construction to permanent. And also at the same time, there were a multitude of extension cords taken off of the construction service without GFI protection, run across the ground, into the building, through windows, through the doors, that type of thing. It was an unsafe condition, and so based on that, I disconnected the power. When Karen approached me about that, she approached me very confrontationally. She wanted to know under what authority I did this and what under authority I did that, as I was trying to get to an appointment, and so I was short with her. But again, she came on me pretty hard, confrontationally, and I dealt with as best I could.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask Joe a question while he's at the...
Yes, one more.
Sorry. I think Mr. Treem made the offer to have this done by September, but he had a caveat that we go back right away and hook electricity up to that. Am I correct in saying you couldn't hook up electricity to that unless substantial work was done before to make it, safe to hook up electricity? Or
If you would provide a construction entrance, the mast and the meter base, the GFI breakers, et cetera, that meet code, which the present one doesn't, then I can connect it back up, yes.
extension cords to run refrigerators and stuff, it means power for...
Extension cords to, power tools, lights, that's fine.
Make sure I understood.
You bet.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Mr. Mayor, may I have a brief word on the issue of electricity?
One more thing, Fred, and then we're going to move on to the next part of this, so go ahead.
The concern that I have about the electricity is twofold. We need light to see and electricity to use power tools. And the objection that Karen made to the precipitous termination of electricity is it just came without any warning. I mean, if we had been told, well, you're not in compliance, you have X days to put in a breaker box or whatever we wanted, we would have done that. But instead, Mr. Nelson just went out and removed the meter, and poof, we just discover it's gone without any notice. And my core objection is that a municipal government that supplies electricity through a monopoly should not unilaterally terminate electrical service without notice. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions of Mr. Treem? Okay, now it's time for the testimony by any other interested parties. Written comments received will be read into the record. And with that being said, I would just add that I would think Karen, knowing that this was the date, could have had a written comment that could have been read into the record as well, just like we're taking written testimony that's going to be presented now. So, Kathy, were you going to read those into the record, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I have 5 of them here. I know we have some out in the audience, too, that have their own. Did you want to start with the ones submitted in writing?
In the audience that would like to testify to this before we read the written testimony to the property at 1011 Wrangell Avenue?
Mr. Mayor,
Seen
I
it.
would ask that we request the contractor to testify.
And on what grounds? Why? Just to say that he's going to submit a building a plan for the
I've got a
project?
couple of questions for him.
Sure.
My name is Joshua Adams. I'm a specialty contractor from Juneau, Alaska, and I specialize primarily in the restoration of old buildings.
Okay, I believe Mr. Hogue has a couple questions for you, Joshua.
Mr. Adams, when were you first contacted by Ms. Ellingston or Mr. Treem to do work on this property?
They contacted me, I believe, last year.
Last year is in 2012?
2012, yeah.
And did you contact Leo, the building official, or one of his co-workers to ask what they would require from you for a plan before work could be permitted?
Yeah, I spoke to Leo Lusak.
When did
last
you?
Year.
Last year in 2012.
In 2012.
Did he tell you that a structure plan would be required at that time, like Joe described this morning?
I believe that Leo Lusak told me that just some general sort of plan with an exact date was what he wanted.
And he wanted something in writing, did he not?
Yes.
And did you ever supply that to him?
No.
Okay. And so, given the size of this house, if you were to start tomorrow to put in foundation or to jack it up and drive pilings, how long would that work take?
Oh, it would take a considerable amount of time in the winter. And I think that's where there was a slight misconception. I haven't given up on this project. It's just that it's impractical at this time to carry out a restoration of the scale that it would require to do that. I do think that it's possible, but I don't know until we get all the stuff, all of the valuable appurtenances out of the house and take a look underneath the floor. As you guys know, the house, it hasn't collapsed, but it's slid off its own pilings. And so it's really hard to take a good close look at what's going on underneath the house until we can see underneath the floor.
And could you have done that for the last year and a half?
I could have, but I was not authorized to.
Okay, and now let me try this question again. If you were to start tomorrow, how long would it take you to finish?
It would take me, I could have it done by Labor Day of next year.
Oh, please, you couldn't do it any earlier than that? Couldn't finish it?
Finished,
Let's
yeah.
just keep it to simple questions.
Probably summer.
How long would it take you to finish, in your estimation, if you started tomorrow?
To bring the house up to a safe condition, it would probably take me at least until the summer, probably midsummer.
Did that answer your question?
If I were to restore the house to safe condition.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joshua. Any other questions from the assembly of Joshua Adams, the contractor?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask the contractor one question?
This isn't a rebuttal back and forth, so he can give his, not at this time, Fred.
Okay.
Thank you, Joshua. If there's no other questions by the assembly. Okay, now Kathy, would you please read into the record the 5 letters that we received? And you'll state who wrote them, I guess.
This is from Ole and Candy Nordgren, and they just have notes on the notice that was sent to them. They have circled demolish the building at the owner's cost, and their comment was, after 4 years, it's about time our town has this eyesore removed from our street as soon as possible. And it's signed by Ole and Candy. I have an email from Pat Weaver. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on 1011 Wrangell Avenue. Mark and I strongly support the demolition of the building on this property. It has been a hazard for years, and this action is long overdue. A letter from Max Warhatch. My wife and I bought the property next door to the property in question on Wrangell Avenue. I did assume that since the property had been posted as a dangerous building, that actions were being taken to rectify the situation. It was only after speaking with folks in the neighborhood that I found out it has been going on for a number of years. I do understand that the wheels of government move slow at times, but I do think that plenty of time has been given in this case. There appears to be no action by the owners to fix their problem, or even at this late juncture to plan to move forward. Nobody wants a building like this in their neighborhood. It is a safety hazard, reduces home values, not on the tax rolls though, promotes propagation of vermin, and is a general eyesore. I believe it being a good neighbor, but again, I feel the owners have been given ample time to move forward with the borough's order. Their lack of action brings me to the conclusion that the building should be destroyed at the owner's expense, and I would encourage the Assembly to support this point of view. Thanks, Max Warhatch. Written comment by Hunt and Robin Parr. Dear Mr. Luzak, this letter is in response to the dangerous building located at 1011 Wrangell Avenue and in favor of action to be taken to clean up the property. As the closest neighbor and directly under the building, it appears to be ready to slide directly into our house or property. It truly is a hazard to us and our family and my children or adults that happen to be in or near this structure. Petersburg is a city of very proud people, and we need to put our best foot forward to the citizens of our city and the many visitors that visit our community and walk, drive, or tour to the north end of the island and clean up unsightly buildings, not only this one, but others in the borough. With the property being uninhabited, wild animals, cats, and dogs make this a haven and waste area that presents a health hazard to the local neighborhood. Animal sounds can be heard at all hours of the day and especially in the evening and at night, making it difficult to sleep. You have my permission to use or discuss this letter at any public or assembly forum. Sincerely, Hunt and Robin Parr. And this one here is from Patricia Simpson. This letter is in response to the dangerous building located at 1011 Wrangell Avenue and in favor of action to be taken to clean up the property. As a nearby neighbor, we fully agree that this building appears to be a hazard to any persons that happen to be in or near this structure, whether they are adults or children. It is an eyesore to the many visitors that visit our community and walk, drive, or tour to the north end of the island. With the property being uninhabited, wild animals, cats, and dogs make this haven and waste area the presence as a health hazard to the local neighborhood. You have my permission to discuss this letter with anyone in the public in this assembly.
There's a couple of Max Warhatches in town. Was that Max Senior, Max, is there a...
Let me see here.
I believe it would probably be Max, I don't know what number, the fourth or whatever it is.
The fourth.
Okay.
Max Warhatch,
Just
the
for
fourth.
clarification for people.
Mr. Mayor, I do have Jean Curry has a cold. She did submit her a statement in writing, but she is here. I didn't know if she wanted to read
If it's
it.
here, read it into the record.
I have a cold, and would you also read my mother's letter?
Okay.
Please, thank you.
This is from Clyde and Jean Curry. Dear Mr. Luzak, I would like to add my suggestions to the hearing on this date concerning the Treem House. We own the rental property next to the Treem House that fell off its foundation several years ago. I would like resolution in the very near future. The building is dangerous, unsightly, and a detriment to safety and property value. The Treems have had more than ample time to resolve this unfortunate situation, yet they have chosen not to. They have shown no consideration or respect for all their neighbors and our community. I believe they have 3 different pieces of property with derelict buildings in Petersburg that are in much the same condition. The location across from our Chamber of Commerce, home on Wrangell Avenue, and Point Frederick Cabin. Owning a home or business requires upkeep and not neglect, as they have shown by failing to maintain them. This has gone on much too long and would appreciate quick action to resolve the situation. We take a great deal of pride in this beautiful community. Clyde and Jean Curry. And the last one I have here is from Betty Peterson. I would like to add my suggestions to the hearing on this date concerning the Treem House. I would like resolution in the very near future. The building is dangerous, unsightly, and a detriment to property value. The Treems have had more than ample time to resolve this unfortunate situation. They have shown no respect for all of their neighbors. Thank you, Betty Peterson.
Okay, so that is all the documents we received to be read into the record. Any response from the building official, the manager at this time? Joe, do you have anything to add?
Just other than that the plan that we're asking for, as I repeated, has to come from them. We're not going to design it then. We'll look at what plan they have, we'll review it, we'll approve it or not. And it's just a matter of getting us a plan, which we have failed to see over these years, of how and what this is going to look like when it's done.
So now it's time for response and final argument by the property owner. Fred, would you like to?
I just have two comments. I don't like to impeach my own witness, but when Joshua told you in response to John Hoag's question about when we first contacted him, he said 2012, and I think he's off by a year. I mean, I could go back and get the emails and the correspondence, but I'm confident that our initial contact with him, with the contractor, was in 2011. But without a calendar and without that list of emails and correspondence, I don't think it should matter, really. It's been a long time since we contacted him, and I think the relevance is that we did not allow the problem to lie fallow. And in fact, I think if we actually looked at the correspondence that Karen had with Leo, we would see that indeed we were beginning to take action on the problem. And she's been moving things out of the house in preparation for the repair work. She is not here to tell us what she's done and when she did it, but so that's the first comment I would make. And secondly, again, I suggest that the dimension of the task is such, and the nature of the outdoor work being seasonal, that the proposal that I'm making, that it be completed by Labor Day, is a reasonable one, and with the two conditions. One of them is the electricity, and we'll put up the whatever breaker box is needed, and the second is the granting of the building permit, and I understand Joe has explained to me now what it is that he and Leo want, and we'll give them the plan that they want. And I can summarize it in just one brief paragraph, and then I'll sit down. Basically, we're going to do the same thing that we did at First and Fram Street. The very same problem. The house fell off the foundation. It's sitting on its pilings. It's not on naked ground, but it's on pilings that are on naked ground. And we'll go in there and lift it up, move it off, drive pilings, and move it back again. And that's exactly the same thing that we did before. And if Eli were here today, he would explain that he's done it on several occasions here in this community. Some of you may know where these examples are, but it's basically a problem because our forefathers loved that hemlock, and they used hemlock for pilings, and hemlock doesn't hold up. So here we are. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Fred. So with that brings the non-compliance. Unless there's any questions of Fred from the assembly. Okay, no one in the audience has any comments on this public hearing. Okay, so the public hearing on the dangerous building at 1011 Wrangell Avenue is now closed, and we will discuss it in executive session later on in the meeting and make a determination what the assembly will ask them to have done.
Call you later, okay? Bye-bye.
Okay, that brings us to item B, public hearings on proposed ordinances. The first ordinance for public hearing today is ordinance 2013-18. Title is littering. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to talk to this ordinance? Seeing none, the public hearing on ordinance 2013-18 is closed. Moves us to a public hearing on ordinance 2013-19. Harbors, Ports Department and Elected Advisory Board. Anybody in the audience like to talk to this ordinance? Seeing none, the public hearing on ordinance 2013-19 is closed. And we'll open the public hearing on 2013-20. That ordinance is Public Safety Departments and Elected Advisory Board. Any comments from the public on that? Seeing none, we'll move on to ordinance 2013-21. And that ordinance is Parks and Recreation Department and Elected Advisory Board. Is there any public comment on that? Okay, seeing none, the public hearing on those two ordinances, 2013-20 and 21, is closed. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda, visitors' views related to the agenda. Is there, Matt?
I don't do this very often, as you can imagine. Matt Lichtenstein, KFSK Radio. Well, I think you have an agenda item tonight that is partly, I think, due to our request for a document, and I just wanted to speak to that briefly, which is, I'm sorry I don't have the letter, but number on your agenda, but it's a request for the document, a memo regarding the medical center, and we had requested that document based on mainly that we feel it's a public document, and Assemblyman Hogue brought up the issue last time, and as we thought about it, we believe that it is a public document. I just wanted to get on the record that we questioned how that document is not public. I guess, and the other question is whether or not there are, because as you look at Alaska's open records laws, there's a number of exemptions for that where you can, have documents that are not public. And there is one in particular talks about, I believe, finances, but it's fairly broad. And that's actually applies, the financial part actually applies to the executive session, which is the other question I would raise, which is I'm not sure how discussing whether this document is a public document, that discussion can be justified to have in an executive session as well. I think more care or clarity or specificity needs to be taken in explaining why that document is not public and why the discussion in executive session is required as to whether it's public or not. So those are two questions I'd raise, before you get to that early on. I don't mean to belabor the point, but we just want to put that on the record that basically we have concerns, and I guess to be frank, we do object to that document without any more specificity about what the document is, why that's not a public document, the hospital memo or the memo regarding the hospital from the city attorney or the borough attorney, and then we also question whether you can actually have an executive session to discuss whether that document is public. Have that in a private session, and I think that needs more specificity when you make a motion for the executive session to clarify, what standard does this meet under law to say that yes, we can have this discussion in private. And those are the two concerns I wanted to raise, and I'll leave it at that unless anyone had any questions.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Is there any more visitors' views related to the agenda? Brian? Okay, Eric.
Mr. Mayor, Assembly members, Brian Lynch, I'm the Executive Director of Petersburg Vessel Owners Association, here to address item 13G. And it seems like only last week I was here addressing this. This is a consideration to be a signatory on a letter to our federal representatives asking that the federal government take more action to ensure that downstream Alaska water quality and fisheries will not be adversely affected by industrial development in BC. I think that description is very apt. This letter kind of dovetails with a letter to Member of Parliament Cullen in June of last year that you guys did send. And this is just as your description stated, seeking more of an active role of the U.S. government, particularly the State Department, in the actual Canadian permitting process, which currently we don't really have any effective voice in. However, that being said, there's currently a work group that has been formed by the mining companies that does include the State of Alaska agencies, DNR, DEC, Fish and Game, but the state has not yet submitted detailed comments, but my understanding is they intend to sometime early this month. Just a couple of points. This letter is really not meant to be anti-mining per se, but the risk of these sorts of mines are one way. The risk to the water quality and fisheries resources is great. There's absolutely no risk of fisheries being a detrimental factor in a mining project. Some people, oftentimes will couch these sort of concerns as jobs versus fish, but for us, this is jobs versus jobs, and there's likely to be no U.S. jobs that come out of this. The harm, again, is all one way. And we're targeting over 60 different commercial, sport, fishery, tourist organizations, tribal organizations, conservation organizations, processors, and some individuals who operate and do business in Southeast Alaska to sign on to this letter, and that is what I'm asking from the Assembly today. I'm not actually asking for a specific signature, but just you're okay to add the Borough of Petersburg onto this letter. So, thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Lynch while he's here? Okay. Eric, you had a comment under this views related to the agenda?
Yeah, my name is Eric Lee, and I'm here to talk about the proposed rate changes to the landfill salvage program. I go up to landfill about 3 times each summer for this and that, the other thing. I'm not a big player in that scene, but I do have a big interest in recycling, and I think it's very important that we try to recycle things as much as we can here in Petersburg. And I think that the increase in rates for the daily use of the landfill there for salvage, I think that will be counterproductive from a financial standpoint. I think that $10 a day for one day to go up there and look for something you may or may not find will discourage a lot of people. Right now, $5 a day is affordable. You go up there, maybe you find something that you're looking for, maybe you don't, but it's worth going up there and looking for, and at the same time doing a public service of recycling something. But $10 a day, I think, actually will discourage people. And I think the rates were $5 for 2 days of recycling. For $10 for one day, that's a 4-fold increase. And I think I think it's unnecessary. I don't think it will have much, whatever it could possibly be gained by that increase will be lost by the recycling that doesn't get done by people who choose not to go up there. So I would request that the council consider keeping the daily rate at $5, or actually $5 per day rather than $5 per 2 days. I think that would encourage the very important activity of recycling in this town, and also it would probably wind up raising as much or more money for the city. So that's about all I had to say about that. It's just a suggestion. I think that I would ask the council and the mayor to consider. I think it would be a lot better solution to the problem, because recycling is so important in this day and age. We have to recycle. We owe it to our kids. We owe it to the future, to encourage recycling in any way we can. So I think that if the rate is a little lower, that's affordable, it will do that. And I think that would be a great thing to do, to keep it low enough where people can go up there and recycle, and at the same time contribute to the community's coffers. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Any other visitors' views related to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to the next item. That's visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Dave, would you please state your name and who you represent, please? Yourself, I'm sure. But
I represent myself. I'm Dave Iselson. I've sat on this board before, a long time ago. I have a few guys who still come to me with problems they think that somebody should address to the city, and I say, come to the meeting. They can't come to these meetings when they're held at this time of the day because they're working. So I don't know when we changed it to day meetings, but you've left out a large part of the community that do work during the day. So if they have something they want to address to you guys, they're out there trying to make a buck so they can pay the taxes and all the other stuff. So that's all I really had to say.
Okay, thank you, David. That came about last December or January when the borough was formed to make it so people from the outlying area could come to town and participate in the meetings, but
Well, I don't know what the answer is, but you've left a large group of people out of the system. And I'm an old has-been, but they still come and talk to me. So.
Well, I 100% agree with you on that, but that isn't what happened. So maybe we'll address it again, but thank you for your input.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to board, commission, and committee reports. And today, the consent agenda, there's local approval of gaming permits for 2014. Gaming permits for 2014 have been filed by the following entities: Swainson's Vending for Sons of Norway, Keto's Cave and Viking Swim Club, Petersburg Little League, Nenana Ice Classic, and Alaska State Elks Association. Due to confidential information placed on the permit applications, the applications are no longer made part of the assembly meeting packet. Anyone wishing to view the applications may do so at the city clerk's office. So I'll entertain a motion to approve today's gaming permits for 2014.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lagadakis to approve today's applications for 2014 gaming permits from the entities listed below. Any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy,
Yes.
John Hogue,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John Haberlick,
Yes.
and Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we'll go through a couple more of these, and then for 1:30 we can take a little break if anybody needs to freshen up or whatever. But report of other officers, review of fiscal year 2013 audit report. Christy Thiel, I don't know if I pronounced that right, senior manager of BDO, the borough's auditing firm. We'll call her on the phone here and get a summary of the borough's financial status. And these statements are available for public viewing at the borough's website.
This is Christy.
Hi, Christy. This is Petersburg.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Okay, Christy, this is Mayor Jensen. You have a report to give us today?
Yes. Can I go ahead and get started?
Yes, would you please?
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Christy Teal with BDO. And for those of you who have not heard of BDO before, Macunda Cottrell merged with BDO effective in July. So although we have a new name, we, the Anchorage office, have worked with you, the city, well, now the borough, for several years. And the partner on the engagement, John Boss, he did retire this last year, but I have worked on this engagement for the past 5 years. So if you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and ask, and I will try and answer them for you. So one of the key questions I get is, what do we do in an audit? And we are hired to audit the financial statements and express an opinion as to whether they are materially correct. So we do apply a concept of materiality, and what that means is whether something is significant enough to influence the decisions of the users of the financial statements. So what we do is we perform field work and test work, and a team of about 5 of us comes down on site, and we do testing and develop an understanding of the internal controls that the borough has in place in order to prevent or detect fraud or misstatement of the financial statements. And we perform our test work and get comfortable with the numbers, and then we assist with drafting the financial statements from the information provided by borough staff. And then at that point is when we come to our opinion. And we did send down a separate bound document called Audit Wrap-Up, and that provides a required list of information under auditing standards that we are required to disclose in regards to our audit. And I would encourage you to read it in its entirety, but I will give you the summary version here. And we issued a clean opinion. We proposed only a few adjusting journal entries in regards to our test work. We did not note any accounts or any uncorrected misstatements that were not corrected. We didn't identify any internal control issues that we would have to disclose to you. And we received, as always, excellent cooperation from Jody and Borough staff, so we don't really have anything bad to report here, so that's good news. But I would encourage you to read that document if you get a chance. So I would like to go through the financials, and if you have those in front of you, if you flip to page 9, this is our independent auditor's report. And this is essentially what you're hiring us to do, is opine on the financial statements. And on page 10, the very first sentence, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. And that essentially means that we have an unmodified or a clean opinion, no material concerns there. And over on page 13, this begins the management's discussion and analysis. And we do not audit this. We tie in the numbers to make sure that they correspond with the financial statements, but it answers a lot of good why and how questions during the year from management's perspective. So I would encourage you to read that also if you have time. On page 28, these are the government-wide financial statements. So this is all-encompassing all of the funds and the related component units to the borough. And this year there was a new standard in place, GASB Statement 61, so the Government Auditing Standards Board came out with this new statement which requires you to evaluate your component units or potential component units. So the financial statements look a little bit different this year with the addition of Petersburg Medical Center. So Jody and I believe we had consulted with the attorneys also in regards to the relationship with the borough. And based on that relationship and the accounting standard, we determined that the medical center should be included. So on page 28, the far right column, Petersburg Medical Center, it's presented there, and it is also presented on page 29. If you look in the far left-hand column, it's the last line down, Component Unit Medical Center. And this is the only place you see the medical center in the financial statements. So it's like a condensed set of financial statements for both the school district and the medical center. Another difference this year, due to a change in standards as well, net assets are no longer called net assets, so the equity is now called net position for the government-wide financial statements and the enterprise funds. And one of the questions I get often is, how is the borough doing, the borough or the city doing financially? Are they improving or deteriorating? Well, if you go over to page 29, the third row from the very bottom, change in net position, this is a good indicator of whether the financial position is improving or not. And so you can see under the governmental activities column, a positive change of $3.6 million. Under the business type activities column, negative $1.5 million, but a combined overall positive change of $2.1 million. And if you flip over to page 30, this begins the fund level financial statements. And I won't go through every fund in detail, but just point out a couple of key things we noticed this year. On page 30, down towards the bottom under fund balances, the last item unassigned, the general fund has unassigned fund balance of $3.9 million. So unassigned basically means that there are no restrictions or constraints on the use of that fund balance. And that is up approximately $300,000 from the previous year. So we've been seeing the general fund position getting better over the last couple of years. And one of the other funds I'd like to take a look at, on page 34, these are the enterprise funds. And specifically, assisted living, this is the fifth column over from the left. And in previous years, assisted living had to borrow cash from the general fund, and so you would have seen in the liabilities section of the balance sheet, you would have seen due to other funds. But this year, the assisted living ended with positive cash, so it was not borrowing from the general fund at the end of the year. And there was a transfer from the general fund over to assisted living this year, but we are seeing where the assisted living fund is doing better. It looks like the revenues and collections increased, which led to a better net position as of the end of the year. So that's a positive change there. And on page 40, we start the notes to the basic financial statements. These provide more detailed info, certain disclosure items that you won't see from the face of the financial statements. I won't go through that in detail either, but these are just more information that standard setters feel are important for the users of the financial statement. And if you go back towards the end of the financials, page 133 starts the single audit section. And really, page 141 is a good summary of our results of the single audit. So also in regards to our financial statement audit, when you expend more than $500,000 of federal or state financial assistance, you are subject to what is called a single audit. And so we are required to look at the borough's compliance with grant provisions for both federal and state money. And on page 141, to summarize the results, we had an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financials as well as the federal and state major programs that we tested. We did not note any internal controls over financial reporting or over grant programs for federal and state purposes. We did not know anything that we would be required to disclose. No material weaknesses noted or anything like that. So overall, in a nutshell, a clean audit, and the borough appears to be doing better this year than last year even, and new standards in effect, but essentially very similar information provided in the financial statements. And I would like to thank Jody and all of the borough staff who helped make the audit happen. We come in and it's kind of a whirlwind. We have to ask a whole bunch of questions and interrupt the day-to-day work, but we received excellent cooperation from the borough staff, so thank you. And are there any questions?
Is there any questions by the Assembly? No, it seems like everybody's satisfied with your presentation and definitely with the Finance Department's work. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for your report, Christy. Okay, now we have a presentation of the 2013 Power and Light Revenue Requirement Study. Power and Light Superintendent Joe Nelson and Consultant John Heberling of D.H. Hiddle Associates Incorporated will explain the study results and answer questions of the Assembly. Okay, Joe.
Mr. Mayor? Yes. Could we entertain a break now? This may take a while.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Is that enough?
Enough by me. Thank you.
Okay, we'll reconvene at 1:25.
That based on the fact that we had consistently not recovered our costs with our revenues. 2010, for instance, we were negative 250,000. 2011, 109. 2012, it showed 390. I noticed that was restated, but at any rate, it was long enough time that we could see that this was a trend, not just a anomaly, that it was a trend. And so we went to work with D. Hiddle and Associates to do this study. In addition to that, we recognize the fact that our declining block rates were set up originally some 25 years ago to encourage usage. And the last block on our residential rate, for instance, at 7 cents, is just 0.2 cents more than what we pay for it. We pay 6.8. So it was basically a pass-through to encourage people to use power. Those good old days are coming to an end. We need to take a look at making very wise use of the energy that we do have. The old hydro that we have available to us is a precious commodity. We need to treat it that way. We're also probably the only utility in Southeast that still has a declining block. Most others have gone to a flat rate, or in some cases like Sitka, who is in some deep water, they've gone to a inverted rate where they penalize high users. So with that introduction, you saw my memo. I'd like to get John up here to speak to you.
Good afternoon. My name's John Heberling. I'm an engineering consultant with D. Hiddle and Associates, and we've been retained by Petersburg Municipal Light and Power to review a number of things related to revenue requirements and electric rates. We've got a few slides that we've put together here, and in lieu of actually putting these out on a PowerPoint projection, which wouldn't work today because of all of the sunshine on the screen, we've just got these in slides here that we can look at. So briefly what I want to do is go through the analysis we conducted and then summarize with the proposed results. As you're aware, and as Joe indicated, we're viewing that the electric rates are insufficient right now to recover the necessary revenue requirement that you do have. So bottom line is we're going to be looking at a little bit of an increase in the process. We started this process a little over a year ago and have been working with Petersburg Municipal Light and Power for a number of years. I personally have been involved with you folks for going way back. And our firm has done some other work for municipal power and light. We mostly do focus on working with consumer-owned utilities like your own. That makes things a little bit different than for investor-owned utilities. In your case, you're essentially operating at a non-profit basis. So the revenue requirement projections involved putting together a pro forma projection of revenues and expenses over the next 5 years. We've also looked at the cost of service that is involved with the electric utility. Cost of service is a process to go through and allocate costs to each customer class. We evaluated the rates and then came up with some alternative rate concepts. If you turn to page 3 in these slides, just to summarize real quickly the revenue requirements, you'll notice the chart at the bottom of the page indicates that the expenses, these are kind of based on current levels of expenses. Power purchases, which are your purchases from SEPA, represent 55% of your overall revenue requirement. That's actually fairly typical for electric utilities to have roughly half of their total cost tied to electric power purchases or production. In your case, it's a little bit more, meaning that the rest of your operations are probably a little bit more efficient than they would be otherwise. As you can see, the other expenses that are in here are distribution, operation, and maintenance. There's some administrative and general expenses, debt service, which is the payment of principal and interest on debt, and then a capital budget, which is relatively small as we go forward. You've come off of a relatively capital-intensive period of time here where there's been some upgrades made to the electric system. And as we're looking forward into the future, we don't see that same level of expense, at least in the next few years. So the revenue requirements that show up on page 4 indicate the chart at the top that we're looking to be a little bit on the low side in 2014, about 3.4%, 3.8% in 2015, and assuming that expenses go up with inflation or something approximately that nature in the future, we're seeing increases in the future. This is cumulative on the bottom, so 5% over where you're at now by the time you're in 2016 and 6.2% in 2017. Cost of service analysis is an analytical process where you define revenue requirements and billing determinants and determine allocation factors, and then allocate the costs of the electric utility operation out to the various utility classes or the customer classes that you're doing or that you currently have. And those are currently the residential, harbor, small commercial, and large commercial. We go through the process of developing allocation factors based on a number of things. One of them that shows up on page 6 on the bottom is another pie chart there that shows, as far as the use of energy within the Petersburg system, large commercial customers use 41.6% of the overall energy, residential about 40%, small commercial 14.2%, and harbor 3.5%. So this is what you would use to allocate the cost of purchase power from SEPA, since it's purchased on an energy basis. So 41.6% of the SEPA cost goes to large commercial customers, is what that's telling us. Yeah.
I just was looking at your pie chart.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out these allocation factors is what that 5% allocation cost is referring to. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand what that allocation factor figure is.
Well, the allocation factors are essentially the portion of identifiable product that the electric utility is providing that is used by the various customer classes. So, yeah, when we're talking about how much energy you produce, 41.6% of that goes to large commercial customers. They're using 41.6% of the overall energy.
Right, but you've got a 5% allocation factor that's different than an admin figure, and I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between those two.
Okay, and are we looking, where's the 5% you're referring to?
It is back on, it was that pie chart that you first
Page
referred to
3.
on page 3.
Oh, allocated expenses?
Yeah,
That's
just trying to
different.
understand what that is.
Yeah, those are actually borough expenses that are of a general nature, the administration and so forth of the borough, motor pool and so forth, that get reassigned out to municipal power and light.
Okay, thank you.
That's a different allocation, but
Yeah.
I'm glad you caught that term, allocated. It shows up in both places. So we go through the process of allocating these costs based on two primary principles: that energy-related costs are allocated out based on how much energy you use as a customer class, and other costs are a little more fixed, set up more on how the system is built and what it's built for. It's built to provide the peak capacity of each individual customer class. So we allocate distribution expenses and so forth based on that. The cost of service results, as shown on page 7, indicate that residential customers are paying a little under their cost of service, and commercial customers are paying a little over, but pretty much close right there. I mean, you've got a system that's fairly well in balance. in looking at this, what you might interpret it as saying is that residential rates probably should go up a little more than commercial rates as you're going forward.
Do you factor in the demand issue when it comes to large commercial when you go to do this? Because, for example, while large commercial might be using 40% of the energy, they may be demanding it at peak times that cost us more money because of our having to have the infrastructure there to support it.
Yes.
I mean, is that factored into this?
That is factored in, and actually, if you go back to page 6, that chart at the top of that page, where you see average coincident peak, that's talking about how much capacity is needed at any one point in time when everyone's all wanting it. In that case, large commercial is looking at close to 50% of the overall system.
Because I'm assuming we're not able to really track our costs directly to large commercial versus residential. We're just using the allocation factor.
That's right.
Okay, so
we look at large commercial and say that 50% of the system components that were built to supply peak demand are being allocated that way at 50% there. So one other thing just to look at here on the bottom of page 7 is that the bars on that chart are indicating that residential, the cost of service based on 2013 costs, which we used in this study, should be up at about 10.46 cents if fully allocated, as opposed to 9.67 where they're at. As I mentioned, the commercial looks to be fairly well in balance the way it's at. Now, following the cost of service analysis, we move into the rate evaluation component of this, and this is where we're looking at what the existing rates will accrue as far as revenue and where they possibly should go. Your current rates right now, as you can see on the tables on page 8, $9 a month for a customer charge. And there is, as Joe mentioned, a declining block in energy. There's 3 energy blocks for residential customers, starting at 11.8, going to 11.4, and then down to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So any kilowatt hours over 650 kilowatt hours are charged at 7 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a very good, very low rate, actually. You don't see that in too many places, even outside Alaska. Commercial rates, all the rate classes are using these 3 energy blocks, and they are all declining, and they get pretty low. So what we were looking at, and I'm just going to kind of skip through some of this because if we want to go back and ask questions we can, but looking at the objectives on page 10, that's the bottom slide on page 10, we were looking to try and phase in any kind of adjustment over a 2-year period in order to minimize any impact on businesses and residences. We wanted to simplify the number of energy blocks down to 2 from 3. And we wanted to, for the most part, increase the last or the highest, the second energy block in this case, in order to start to send a price signal that would say that as we look forward into the future, it's going to cost more to generate more power, to build new generators and so forth to provide that next block of power. So it's kind of a slight shift to move that up. There are a few other things, for instance, with commercial, dealing with some transition points going from small to large commercial. We wanted to leave the monthly customer charge where it's been. the customer charge can move around. You can allocate costs differently that way, as well as demand charges can be moved around. But the customer charge is something that's actually very sensitive. Most residential customers prefer not to have much change to that. And we wanted these rates to move a little closer towards cost of service if possible. But what we've got now, as you look on page 11, is this proposed concept of 2 energy blocks. And we'll just focus on residential to begin with. Instead of being 0 to 325 kilowatt hours for the first block, it's now 0 to 500. And the rate is set to be pretty much where it was. So anybody in any small consumers will not see any impact at all to speak of with this proposed adjustment. We want these rates to actually produce about 2% increase the first year and another 2% the second year is the objective in this. So as you look at page 12, the projected revenue increases. Overall at the bottom, from year 2, overall we're looking at about a 4% increase. Residential customers are going to go up on average 4.4, harbor customers 4.3. General service, we're renaming this small commercial class to general service, and then large commercial would go up about 3.5% on average. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody within each of these rate classes goes up 3.5%. It will change because of the way that these energy blocks are being moved around. But for the average residential consumer at about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, the increase is 10 cents for a monthly bill. And that was one of the objectives in this too, is to try and keep the impact on small end consumers very low. Larger residential consumers will see more of an impact. And that's where we start to make that shift, that second energy block is moving up. And you can see on those proposed rates that it's going from 7 cents up to 7.8 cents in the first year, and then and up to 8.1 cents at the end of second year. So it's a noticeable change there. So with that, I think I'll open it up to questions if anyone has any specific questions they'd like to ask.
Any questions of Mr. Huberman?
I just had sort of comment question. So my understanding of this is that will the system rebuild to be funded from current revenue? In any rebuild of the system is funded from current revenue and reserves. So any increase in cost is going to cover power generation. It's not going to fund any future capital improvement. Is that correct?
Looking forward, yes. We have all of the capital improvement or replacement, renewals, replacements, replenishments, whatever that might be involved in the future. At this point, it's pretty much all going to come from the current revenues. There's no assumption in here of any new debt or any borrowings of any type.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
If I could just add that, like he mentioned, we've had some fairly major projects. The conversion of the old 2400 volt system that we accelerated, we borrowed money to do that. And then the addition of the generator at Scow Bay, we borrowed money to do that. Looking forward, we tried to levelize the capital expenditure each year just to maintain our system. And so we're not seeing, at least in the term of the study, the 5-year, we're not seeing anything, big bumps in that.
Okay.
One of my concerns with the electrical system in particular is Joe doesn't have the luxury of state legislative grants or DEC low interest loans and grants. Electric systems tend to be self-funded. I mean, even at these rate increases, it appears we're still not covering depreciation.
And that's a good point. Yes. When we look at your cash obligations, depreciation's not included in there. But some of the items that depreciation will usually fund, such as the capital budget and the amortization of debt, is acknowledged as a cash obligation. So you'll probably still tend to see, when depreciation is added in, that you're not collecting a full amount to fund that full depreciation allowance. But unless you've got some expenditures coming up, the only place that depreciation would go would just be into some kind of reserve at this point, for future replenishment of the system.
John.
And I guess this would be more of a question for you, Joe. I know we're pretty well maxed out on our usage now. Is there any capital project that could go on in the community, or improvement of generators, or generator Cabin Creek, or improvement of the Crystal Lake generator that would help us get more electricity that we would need to fund?
Well, first of all, our system still has some room on it. If we're talking about our distribution system, we still have some room on it. We don't have we're not approaching an overload condition on our existing lines, for instance. Since we built that new line in behind the airport and split our load up, we're still in very good shape that way. Our substation transformer, the main transformer, is fine. Now that we have the new generator at Scow Bay, we have enough diesel generation to back up the system should we lose Tyee. So in the immediate future, by that I mean the next 5 years, we don't see any need to increase the capacity of our system. It's well able to handle what we've got now. Plus, we're still seeing conversions to electric heat kind of by default. People are going in and buying portable heaters and things like that and plugging them in. I noticed this morning when I checked the load, we have the generator at Vine Slough at 1 meg right now, and when I looked at how much was delivered here in town, it was 0. It was all being used before it got to town. Now that's an increase of almost 100% increase over since 4 years ago. So there's lots of folks out there that have got heaters and are not going out to the wood pile. Did that answer your question?
Basically, we've got what we need.
We do have. What we need to concentrate on now is that we've got a fairly old pole system. We've got a lot of poles out there that are beginning to grow ferns and small trees out the top of them, and those poles need to be replaced. So we're looking at a comprehensive pole change-out program over the next few years.
But for generation, we have plenty.
We do.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
I've got
Mr. Hope?
Yeah, I've got a few. Do you have something?
No. Go ahead.
Looking at page 5 of your study, you talk about the SEPA rebate. How many years now has the utility received the SEPA rebate?
Yeah.
I think it's been 3 out of the last. Excuse me. I think it's been 3 out of the last 4.
Is it reasonable to project that you just can't count on it in the future, or should it be budgeted with some?
If I switch and put my SEPA board hat on, I would say don't count on it. It may be there and it may not be there. We're looking at basically the second year of water shortage, of dry year, and so I'm anticipating that the SEPA revenues are going to be down again this year. Last year we were still able to process a rebate. It was smaller than the previous year, but this coming year, and then switching hats again back to the power superintendent, I don't know how you budget for that because it's indeterminate. Just pretend it's based on the performance, the overall performance of SEPA.
And there are those that would say that you should be an advisor as opposed to part of the SEPA board. Okay. I do have some more questions, if I may, on this. Okay, on table 3, or A 3.1, of which is, all I can say is it's towards the back.
Yes.
You've got land, Mitkoff Highway plant relocation, $630,000. That is money reserved for the purchase of land, or has the land been purchased? Joe, maybe you can help on this one. Top figure.
Sue, help me out here.
I'm not seeing it. Is it page 2 of 2?
No, it's page 1 of 2.
Page 1 of 2.
Okay.
At the top.
That's
probably the capital project of when we built the, changed everything, moved everything out to the courtyard.
this. There's no land purchase in this. No, this is part of the ongoing project to move out the road to the property that was previously purchased.
All right, so this is a expenditure based on a projection of moving?
Well, this is actually an asset here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an asset.
Right.
The land is an asset.
Oh, yes.
That's what it's reflected as. Okay.
We bought the other property too, the lower part and the upper part, but it didn't amount to this amount, so. Overall, between the two, I can't remember the amounts on what our purchase price was, but it.
I have to look and see what I have in my fixed asset schedule. I need to compare these sheets. So what I have, but
Well, that's just like confusing to me because down at the bottom of that section, you got clearing lands and ROW of 77,000. Now, is that an asset?
Well, right of way, yeah, it would be an asset.
All right, so this is the value of right-of-way land that's been purchased?
That's the way this would be interpreted, yeah, or is owned.
And if the borough was to reverse what I understand was a direction given years and years ago and say there's no reason to relocate anything more than has been relocated to save money, then that would free up these assets potentially for the use by the utility.
Not really. We have built a metal building.
Okay, is that the land that with the building on it
That's
today?
the generators.
Okay, all right. The depreciation that is listed is, you said depreciation allowance. I've seen two types of depreciation. One that Uncle Sam lets us take if we're running a business for profit, and two, what I would call a realistic depreciation, which is the functional life of whatever we're using. What do we have here?
We are looking here at the the accounting form of it.
That's Uncle Sam's form, correct, we're talking about?
Yeah, more or less.
So this does not reflect the realistic depreciation of the life of these items.
Well, yeah, we didn't go through and actually evaluate depreciation here, but it's probably close, I would think. You know, in most utility plant, we look to, electric utility plant, we look to last about 40 years, depreciate over 40 or 50 years. 30 to 50 years is the way it kind of works. So, yeah, we weren't actually looking at the depreciation, but it should be more Uncle Sam's approach, I think, is what you're looking at.
The other question is that the beginning cash balance this year was 6.1 million. Would have been a lot more if there hadn't been a certain construction project that had gone on. The question is, what for this fund, for the realistic risks and use, is an appropriate cash balance?
It's a good question. I did not look at that this time around. In previous studies, actually going back several years, we did take a closer look at what that would realistically be recommended to be. but I can't tell you right now what it should be.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because there was an issue of some of this cash balance may have been reflected saving money for a potential move. It's probably not going to happen of your whole shop, Joe. So I'm curious as to whether if the cash balance is in excess of what is really needed for day-to-day operations, then the question is other than to look at this inverted allocation, is raising rates necessary?
The bottom reserve amount as determined in 2005 by Hill was $2.5 million in 2005 dollars. I think today that would be closer to $3 million probably. So if you take that $3 million bottom and add to it present obligations that we have to pay for contracts that have already been signed and that sort of thing, that you'll come up with a number that's not too different from what the balance is. In other words, there's not a lot of money that you could draw out of there because we are not making that move out the road.
Where in either the budget or this is the obligations that would add up to another $3 million?
It's an exercise that Jody would have to go through and look at the present balance of obligated funds. We still have some money due McGraw. Well, no, we finally processed that last payment, but we still have some money due Marsh Creek, for instance, for the generator. And so I don't have those figures.
I just wanted to chime in one thing. At the end of 2012 fiscal year, that's in here, the Power and Light had a considerable amount of bond revenue left to spend on their projects, which that money, which you still have some bond revenue left remaining, I'd probably say at the end of June 30th, I think it was about $600,000 is in those numbers probably in your reserves. So, and that has to be spent on your capital projects for the voters.
And you could give us, if you consider a rate increase, you could give us a more detailed analysis of that?
Sure.
The next question is there any chance with either of your hats, Joe, of any kind of low-interest loan programs for either business or commercial or residential to encourage weatherization and conservation?
The borough manager has very much encouraged me to get involved in demand side issues, conservation. And at this point, rather than get into the banking industry, we've chosen to back the air source heat pumps. And so we are making a rebate available for air source heat pumps. And they are turning out to be quite popular. There's a lot of them being installed. There will be more installed if they can get a rebate. That's not to say that isn't something we could do. Certainly, it's something we could look at, but there are state programs, a number of state programs that do this very thing. So I'm not sure if it'd be a good option, but we could certainly consider it.
And you could certainly educate us on what state programs are available for residents of this community to do weatherization?
Yes, we could.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else with questions? Joe or John? Okay, seeing none, thanks for your presentation. Okay, that brings us to the mayor's report. And then first item there is the appointment of a deputy mayor. The retirement of Sue Flint from the Assembly has created a vacancy in the deputy mayor position. Without any objection by the Assembly, I would like to appoint member Cindy Logadakis to the mayor pro tem position. Do you still think it's a good idea, Cindy?
Sure.
Okay. Any objections by any other members? Seeing none, Cindy is appointed in the vice mayor position. Work session reminder. Thursday, December 5th at 9 a.m., the Assembly and Hospital Board will conduct a work session. Items to be discussed are finances, budgeting, and development of municipal code provisions for the board. I will not be able to attend that meeting, so I will have to hear from other Assembly members what takes place. Land sale reminder. The Borough will be auctioning off 4 real property lots at the December 16th, 2013 meeting. The lots are located on the undeveloped portion of Valkyrie Street. The minimum acceptable purchase price is $6,000 for each lot. Further information on the land sale is available at the clerk's office. Due to the timing of our meetings being so close together, last week we had a meeting, the manager has not compiled a report. Unfinished business. Ordinance for third and final reading. Ordinance 2013-17, an ordinance providing for Chapter 14.12 entitled Sanitation of the Municipal Code, updating current language to reflect Borough Incorporation and providing incentive for recycling. This is a third and final reading. I would also add to this, the ordinance has been revised by Attorney Heidemann since its second reading. In Section 14.12-.210, fines for violations are to be as provided in Chapter 1.16. Proposed ordinance 2013-22 provides for a fine schedule for the code. So I would entertain a motion to adopt 2013-17 in the third and final reading.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Haverlick to adopt 2013-17 and its third and final reading. Any discussion? Mr. Hogue.
Mr. Mayor, listening to testimony at the last session and this session, I guess if I may have a question for Carl. If we are to, is there a way to reflect in the rates that you charge for recycling to encourage people going up and getting spare parts, in essence, what they need for, say, a refrigerator, a freezer, a broken item, versus people going up there and salvaging scrap that the borough could be putting in its own revenue stream?
That question has been the hardest to answer with this. That's what we're trying to address with the proposed ordinance. It's very difficult to differentiate between customers as they come through the gate and go in the landfill. If we set up a system where commercial salvagers were categorized in one area and received certain rates for doing their activities, and the small operator that just wants a part off a washing machine in another category, how do we police that? Because everybody's going to want to pay the least amount for a permit. Once they get through the gate, if they come out with a control knob off a washing machine, hooray. If they come out with a pickup load full of copper, how do we deal with that? So it's very difficult. It's not an easy question to answer as far as setting up the program in differentiating between customers.
Mr. Hogue.
Has there been consideration of simply putting the valuable items that is going to bring in money to the borough off limits for recycling?
We've thought about that. We have. It turns into a higher effort in policing the program. It's something that we could do, and it's something that can be done without really any need for that to be in the ordinance. It's not in the ordinance now, so that can be an administrative action taken after the fact, but that could be something.
Thank you.
I would, just my opinion, just seeing that there's been a change in addition since the second reading, I would consider that we have to go back and have it start again. So if it's a big enough change, and I read through it, but I didn't get the, clarification of the fine amount, but I didn't obviously read it into that much depth, but.
Could we ask the clerk her opinion on that, Mr. Mayor?
What's that?
Ask the clerk if we need to go back for a first reading.
If we change an ordinance after the public hearing, is it prudent to have a public hearing again?
It's actually going to be at your pleasure. You do not have to, it's not required to, but if you feel you should, then you probably should.
I just believe in being as open as we can and giving people a chance to comment. And to say that we could take away the recycling effort that is taking place in the dump without it being in the ordinance, maybe we can, but I know there's going to be some ruffled feathers if they can't comment on a public hearing on that as well. Just trying to,
Mr. Mayor, can I just?
yes.
I personally look at what was proposed by your attorney as not something of major effect that needs to have a public hearing, but if you're planning on changing the salvaging program as it's understood, then I can understand what you're thinking about having another hearing. But what your attorney's proposed for you as a change is pretty minor. It's just a more
Okay.
of an administrative.
Okay, thank you. Carl, do you want to make another comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The changes that are made, as Kathy said, basically it's setting up a fine schedule dealing with violations of the code, which is going to happen for every code, and that process is not a big change as far as the operational aspects of the code as presented in the last reading. If there's a will of the Assembly to change the salvage program and get away from the commercial nature of it, it would be great to receive a consensus, because that obviously that's the direction the department is going. If I knew for certain that the Assembly was supportive of that move, then we as a department could make changes that would go down that road.
It seems to me that it should have been more presented to us in a clear, that is the direction that, the department might want to go.
Well, if I may, I think it was Eric that mentioned, yes, he was looking at it from a standpoint that we were stopping recycling. Am I correct, Carl, in that material is still being recycled? It's just a matter of who's recycling it rather than, I'm not sure Eric understood the process in the standpoint. Just because we're not allowing, Steve to come down there and get it, doesn't mean that the borough isn't sending that stuff off to the recycling provider. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
All of the material in that pile will be recycled.
That's what I thought. The big question is back to kind of that issue of, is the purpose of allowing people up to the landfill to get a spare part that they need, or is it to promote this secondary line of business for people who go up there, recycle the scrap for a profit, therefore lowering the borough's take, if you want to call it, on that stuff? And that becomes the question. Do we administratively or operationally want Carl's folks to manage a process that benefits, people going up there and looking for copper, and we just pay for that? Or do we want to have a system that just says, okay, we've got a permit that you can go up there and look for a part for your washing machine, but it's not designed for commercial salvaging?
I think didn't Carl make a statement that that's what this was put in place for originally, was for people to be able to go up and, I've used it to go up and get a piece for my old car that I have off island for hunting, and it was very beneficial. I've only been up there 2-3 times and paid my $5 or whatever it was. So I think we need to be careful if we all of a sudden pass this ordinance and then people aren't allowed in there to do what they have been doing in the past. Mr. Hogue?
I suggest that we can pass this ordinance because it doesn't affect the big issue of, do we allow commercial recycling that'll reduce, in essence, the revenue the borough gets. And I would suggest we could put it on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, and have hearings on that issue and listen to the commercial people. And because if Carl could administratively says, all right, we know these things, copper, aluminum, these items have value, we're simply not going to allow them to be recycled because that's a loss of revenue to the borough. Hypothetically, we should be maximizing the borough's revenue. On the other hand, if we're hurting existing businesses that employ people, there's an offset there.
Yeah, I don't know how much it would be employees, but definitely individuals have been using it and getting.
Well, then I think in deference to them that we could go ahead and have the third reading, vote on this today, and then bring it back as a discussion item, as on the agenda, as to whether, and just simply to say if anything's got value that's going to bring revenue to the borough, it's not going to be available for commercial recycling or any recycling by individuals.
So before the administration would make that decision, it needs to come before a public.
It may not need to, but I think that would be good government.
I think it would be prudent.
Yes.
That's probably the only way I would vote for this again today in the third reading, is if something like that happened before the administration decided you can't go up there and collect things you've been used to doing. How many years has that been going on? 2, 3 years, Carl? I mean, it's been a while.
Oh, no, yeah, it's been in place for almost 10 years, I think.
Oh,
The
wow.
program itself has been.
Yeah, I think the realization of what people can drag out of there, though, and turn a buck on is grown.
It's gotten bigger and bigger, yes.
Yeah, so.
And if I may, that's primarily, I think, due to the rising cost of metals.
Right.
I mean, it's a problem down south. People steal copper off of line trucks and such because of the value of it.
Yeah, take off existing equipment.
So is there any more discussion on ordinance 2013-17?
18. Oh, it's 17, I'm sorry.
It is 17, I had it, yep, it's 17. Well, seeing none, will the clerk...
I'm going to ask a question or pass on some information. Your future member, assembly member, Mr. Lynn, did make comments to this and asked that I bring them up. It was a minor thing, and it is an oversight on our part. Sanitation is not supposed to be the burning, open burning part. He has concern about that, was not supposed to be applied to the outside, and he wanted it amended in the ordinance you're considering now. However, Sarah said, our attorney, that that is more appropriate to be addressed in 9.24, and she's recommending we just add an extra section to this ordinance that says, subsection 1205B shall not be applied outside of Service Area 1, except into accordance with a borough open burning ordinance subsequently adopted by the Assembly. I don't know if Bob knows that we're adopting these ordinances as we get to them, and they affect other things that we have to look at, and that's what he was concerned about. Don't say we can't burn outside current city limits or what used to be city limits. And this was Sarah's way of relaxing that. I'm having a hard time explaining it. The no burning, which this ordinance that you're looking at in section 141205B says they have to have a permit to do any open burning. When the charter was developed and when we were promoting the charter, we said we're not going to enforce any no burning laws on outside. So to correct this, and not to correct it, the true place that this no burning has to be taken care of is in chapter 9.24, a different title, and that's where she wants you to address it. When we get around to amending 9.24, we'll address it then. In the meantime, to assure the people outside that we're not going to enforce this no burning, she wants this subsection added that I had just read, that it does not apply to outside until at one point in time we address it in 9.24.
So she's suggesting that we add under 14.12050B as a subsection to B?
It's just going to be a subsection to your ordinance, that thing that you're adopting right here now is not going to apply to the outside. That no burning is going to be taken up when we look at chapter 9.24.
Currently, Carl, burn barrels are still allowed, aren't they, without calling in and getting a permit?
Yes, I believe so. That activity is covered by the fire department, and I believe that is an approved activity. Burn barrels are.
That's
for.
They have rules to follow as well,
Yes.
but they do not have to call and apply for a burn permit, and they're free.
So if anybody on the assembly feels we need to amend this section, we need a motion to do so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As I understand it, the attorney's recommendations don't amend 1412, but to amend in chapter 9 when we get to it.
Of the charter.
Right.
Yeah,
And to
of the code.
And yeah, and to let them assurances that that is what we're going to do. She wants us to add a subsection to the ordinance we're adopting, but it's not affecting the code. It's just like where the effective date of the ordinance, we say it takes effect on a certain date. She also wants it in there that we are not putting this on the outside. It's only on Service Area 1 until we hit 9.24.
So this amendment would be on page 15 of 15, section 5.
Could put it right in there, yeah.
And you would add a sentence saying
1412.050B shall not be applied outside of Service Area 1 except in accordance with the Borough Open Burning Ordinance subsequently adopted by the Assembly.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move that we amend section 5 of the ordinance to add those exact words at the last sentence.
Is there a second?
I will second.
It's been seconded by Member Lagadakis. So any discussion on that amendment? Will the clerk call the roll on the amendment?
Nancy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
John Hogue.
Yes.
And John Haverlick.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to ordinance 2013-17 is passed. Now we need to vote on the ordinance as amended. Any discussion on that before we vote? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
John Haverlick.
Yes.
John Hogue.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
And Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes 5-0. Okay, ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 2013-18, an ordinance providing for Chapter 9.12 entitled Littering of the Municipal Code, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. This is the second reading. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2013-18 in its second reading. Any discussion? Kathy?
And this is the other one that Mr. Lynn had some concerns with that Sarah has addressed. He felt that the one section that prohibits postings on like posts and all that would prohibit our posting of on our notices on signs. So Sarah is recommending an addition to that, and you'll see it we can put it in the third reading so you have it there, just maybe so you know what's coming there. We're going to retain that language, but it's going to be done administratively, and I can read what she's got proposed. No person shall post or affix any notice, post, or any other device calculated to attract the attention of the public to any lamp post, public utility pole, traffic, parking, or street sign, or control device, or shade tree, plant, or planter located in the public place or upon any public structure or building, except as may be authorized or required by law or as designated by a borough official. That would leave it, she's looking at that would leave it up to like the harbor department, the harbor master to say, yeah, you can continue to put your postings on the rampways. Yes, we can post on our bulletin board, we're sticking out at Papke's. But he was concerned that language as originally proposed was prohibiting any postings, and so this was her remedy. And I just wanted you to know you're going to see that in the third and final reading added to it.
Okay, thanks for the heads up. Any other discussion? Will the clerk call the roll on 2013-18 in the second reading?
Mark.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
John Haverlick.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
And John Hope.
Yes.
Okay, the next ordinance in the second reading is ordinance 2013-19, an ordinance providing for the Harbors and Ports Department and Advisory Board. This is the second reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this.
So move.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Haverlick and seconded by Cindy Lagadakis to approve ordinance 2013-19 in its second reading. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I will be voting against the next three ordinances because first, I think the advisory board for harbor should be appointed, and second, I don't think the other two boards that are in the next two ordinances should be in existence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Any other comments on this ordinance 2013-19? Will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
John Hogue.
No.
Mark.
Yes.
John Haverlick.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2013-19 passes its second reading with a 4-1 vote. Ordinance 2013-20, an ordinance providing for a borough health officer, fire department, police department, and retention of a 5-member elected advisory board. That's the short title. Second reading. In response to concerns voiced at the November 25th, 2013 Assembly meeting that the ordinance automatically designated the chief of staff of the medical center to be the health officer, Attorney Heidemann has recommended that section 3.20.010 be amended to give the borough flexibility to acquire the most knowledgeable person for different needs. The proposed amendment provides for the borough manager to appoint a health officer for each specific need as it arises. So that's a change. It's been recommended. Entertain a motion to adopt 2013-20 in its second reading.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I know it's been a long meeting, but motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Logadakis to adopt 2013-20 in its second reading. Any discussion? Do we need to make an amendment to?
No, it's already in there.
Okay, that was changed then. All right, so seeing no discussion, we will have the clerk call the roll.
Nancy.
Yes.
John Heverlet.
Yes.
John Hogue.
No.
Mark.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2013-20 passes in its second reading. Next ordinance up for second reading is 2013-21, an ordinance providing for borough parks and recreation and retention of a 5-person elected advisory board. I would entertain a motion to adopt this in its second reading.
I move we adopt ordinance 2013-21.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Logadakis, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2013-21 in its second reading. Any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy.
Yes.
John Hogue.
No.
John Heverlet.
No.
Mark.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2013-21 fails in its second reading. It didn't get 4 votes. So 3-2 vote, right, Kathy? Is that
That's
what you counted?
correct.
So is the ordinance dead then?
It is, unless you want to bring it back for another reading, you can do
Okay.
that. But then we'd have to get into some technicalities. Someone would have to change their vote, and
Yeah, okay.
because I don't think the two that voted against it are going to change their mind.
Probably not. I know that's how that would have to work. Okay, well, no Parks and Recreation Board at this point. Okay, judo appeal of the Petersburg Borough boundaries. There's no new information. Still waiting for the Superior Court judge's decision. And the next issue in front of us is consideration to be a signatory on a letter to our federal representatives asking that the federal government take more action to ensure that downstream Alaska water quality and fisheries will not be adversely affected by industrial development in British Columbia. This is what Brian Lynch presented today. So I'd entertain a motion to let the borough be a signatory on this letter.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Hogue to sign on this letter that about Rivers Without Borders, basically. Any more discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy.
Yes.
John Hogue.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
John Heverlet.
Yes.
And Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes 5-0. We will sign the letter. New business. Ordinance 2013-22, an ordinance providing for a fine schedule for the municipal code and including a section addressing injunctive and civil relief. This is the first reading. The ordinance establishes fine amounts for violations of provisions in Titles 4, 6, and 14. It also provides for a unified fine schedule for violations of the code as to facilitate enforcement and collection of such fines, and provides for injunctive and civil relief for code violations. Entertain a motion to pass 2013-22 in its first reading.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Hogue, seconded by Member Logadakis to adopt ordinance 2013-22 in its first reading. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
John Heverlet.
Yes.
And John Hogue.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2013-22 passes 5-0 in its first reading. The next thing on the agenda today is resolution 2013-26, fiscal year 2014 shared fisheries business tax program alternative method resolution. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Hogue to adopt resolution 2013-26. Is there any discussion on this item? Will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John Hall,
Yes.
John Heverlich.
Yes.
Okay, that moves us on to the next item, authorization to enter into a professional services agreement with P&D Engineers in the amount not to exceed $21,000 for engineering services for the permitting and design work of a new fish cleaning float at the South Harbor. The Borough has received a Chinook Salmon Mitigation Infrastructure Grant in the amount of $225,800 for this project. I would entertain a motion to authorize this.
So move.
Second, by anyone?
Second.
Moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Hoag to authorize the Borough to go into a professional services agreement with P&D not to exceed $21,000 to design the fish cleaning station. Maybe it'll help the sea lions go away.
Maybe.
Any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John Heverlich,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John Hall.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is authorization to enter into a professional services agreement with MRV Architects per their November 25th and 26th, 2013 proposal in the amount of $91,560 to provide the conceptual and schematic building design process for the police station and municipal building renovation projects. The proposed expense is broken down into two portions, $65,444 for the design work of the police department and $26,116 for municipal building functions. Funding for the municipal building portion of the work will require a supplemental expenditure appropriation. So entertain a motion for this authorization.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Strand to authorize the Borough to go into negotiations or have MRB Architects come up with a conceptual and schematic building design for the police and municipal building.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add, one thing that Jody reminded me of is, in this year's general fund budget, we put a contingency line item of $90,000 for just these kind of expenses. So when I said that the $26,000 would require a supplemental budget, it will not.
It's already been budgeted
we can
for.
take it out of that contingency fund that we put in just in case for things like this.
And you don't need assembly approval to do that, I wouldn't imagine.
Correct, but just so you're aware, we won't have to go into a supplemental budget.
Another one of Jody's little piggy banks. That's good. Okay, any more discussion? Mr. Hope.
I am concerned that we end up putting the police building back in an area that the elevation is too low should there be a major earthquake or tsunami. Ideally, it should be on higher ground. While this is an attractive concept because one, it leaves it downtown, which is good, and two, we look at remodeling this part of the municipal building, which is long past due that need. We may be in a long-term pace in putting the police station in the wrong place, and the only other option I can think of, because obviously putting the police station by itself as originally planned is a price tag, I think, beyond the will of the voters and beyond what we can reasonably expect from the governor. So the only other option I can think of is putting it so it becomes part of the fire hall, and you have the pad then where the parking lot is already done, and you look at then the cheaper part of another parking lot. I was wondering if that conceptual idea would save us more money.
Didn't we go through that drill?
We went through that drill before we knew how much that new building was going to be.
If I may, I don't really. We have never asked Corey or MRV to do that study. I think when Jensen and his group took a quick look at it, I don't know how seriously they do. I mean, his basic concept was to get the police station to fit would obviously involve building on the parking lot, as well as pretty much gutting the inside of the fire hall's admin area. And I haven't heard that that was something everybody wanted to do. So I did not ask Corey or his group to do any kind of analysis on that part of that project.
You know, I could see Member Hoag's concern, but if the wave big enough to get the police station comes, there won't be anything left of Main Street either, probably. Or so you know, I'm in favor of moving forward with this because there's potential that not only do we get the police station done, which is in dire need of it, we get the municipal building potentially upgraded as well. Member Lagadakis.
May I ask either Sandy or Steve? I know from talking to Chief Agner when I toured the police facility that there's a redundancy in the 911 system, that you have a backup up at the fire hall. The main thing then would be if we had people who were incarcerated and dealing with that, do we have any potential backup plan for something like that if there was an earthquake or any kind of an emergency that we had to move people out of that facility?
Probably have to evacuate them off the island. Or turn them loose. I mean, I hate to say it, that's a legitimate response. If someone's being held for, for drunk and disorderly, you turn them loose in an event like that. I mean,
Which they'd be happy to do, I
That
bet.
actually is part of the plan.
Okay.
Just to turn them loose.
I wasn't being flippant, I'm sorry. It sounded that way.
It's a reality. So is there any more discussion on this authorization to go into professional services agreement with MRV for design of this building, which houses the municipal building and the police station? Will the clerk call the roll?
John Hoag,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes, the authorization passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is consideration to release attorney-client privileged information. Attorney Brennan has requested the Assembly, not the staff, determine if the document in question should be released. Prior to the Assembly taking a vote on whether to release a privileged document that addresses organizational and legal relationships between the Borough and Petersburg Medical Center, the Assembly will meet with Attorney Brennan in executive session. And it says, see agenda item 17A1. And from talking with our borough attorney, he believes that this is legitimate because of the attorney-client privileged communication involved with it. And he said it's been challenged in the state before, and it's made it through. So I don't know if that answers Matt's question a little bit earlier, but he might not agree with it. It doesn't look like, but anyway, consideration to release attorney-client privileged information. Need a motion to discuss it any further, I suppose.
Mr. Mayor, I thought the discussion would be in executive session.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's just to let people know what's going on. It is getting rather to be a drug-out meeting, but communications is the next item. Any communications from anyone? Assembly discussion items. Recognitions. This agenda item is reserved to acknowledge individuals, groups, departments, agencies, or anyone for their contributions toward the betterment of the Petersburg community. Anybody have any recognitions? Donnie Hayes.
Yeah, just really quickly, of course we had our tree lighting ceremony this past weekend, which was absolutely fantastic. I just want to recognize, of course, Carl and his crew and Joe and his crew and all the work that they put in to make sure that looks beautiful. But also to recognize Matt Briner, who went out of his way to make sure to walk up and down the street and to get some additional lights that were, donated by businesses in our community. And it just shows us how important our businesses are and what they do for us, and they really are special, and they just need a big hug every once in a while. So just want to tell them all thank you.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up if someone else didn't, and thank the businesses for donating, and talk to Matt about it, Briner, and he said next year he might get together a group of people, and who knows what he's got up his sleeve, but maybe there'll be lights all over the place. So.
Made that suggestion.
Yeah, sounds good. He likes to decorate it, which is good.
His yard is wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's nice. Okay, any more recognitions? Well, seeing none, moves us to item 17, and it's entertain a motion to go into executive session, and the purpose of executive session is for the assembly to, one, meet with Attorney Brennan to obtain his opinion as to whether release of the communication that addresses organizational and legal relationships between the Borough and Petersburg Medical Center could or would be injurious to the public interest, and two, to conduct deliberations in regard to the that's a tongue twister, adjudicatory non-compliance hearing held on the Treem Ellingstead property at 1011 Wrangell Avenue. So entertain a motion to go into executive session for those two reasons.
So move.
Second.
Okay, moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to go into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. A roll call, okay.
Cindy?
Yes.
John Hope?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And John Henry?
Yes.
Yes. Time for a little 5 open session. And we're going to address the announcement of the Assembly decision on the non-compliance hearing first.
Oops.
So, Mr. Hope.
Mr. Mayor, I vote that the move that the Assembly adopt the recommendation of the building official that this, in essence, has been a 4-year opportunity to fix this building. It is a danger to its to the neighbors, and it's has got hazards in it, and it's got vermin, and that the city borough attorney be directed to write findings of fact and conclusions of law within that, and also noting the diminution of value in that building over the time period, and that the owners be given 30 days to repair, renovate, or demolish that building. If they don't, the borough will demolish it at the owner's expense.
Second.
Okay, you have the motion. I can't repeat that, but it's been moved by Mr. Hoag and seconded by Member Strand to authorize our borough attorney, Mr. Brennan, to provide documents to Mr. Treem. So, any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
John Heverlick?
Yes.
John Hope?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 5-0. We will get this documented and send it to Mr. Treem. Okay, the next action is on the release of privileged document. I would entertain a motion to take action on this. Anybody have a Mr. Hoag?
Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to council. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. I recognize he did not write this opinion to be released to the public. I think, though, that given the important issues that are discussed in there that have borough-wide import regarding the medical center, and any issue that the borough is holding back, something it wants to hide, I think that I move that the memorandum as written be released to the public as a public record.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Discussion.
I can't support this, but I missed all this joint meeting in September, so that's part of my confusion. But I'm having trouble supporting this, so.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I think some of this was just individual queries that individuals wanted answers for, not the whole assembly. So I wouldn't be in favor of releasing the entire document, because it was just one or two people at the most saying, well, what if? And that doesn't seem to have public importance, or the public should want to know about it. And it's only some of it was one person just asking a question, and the attorney was given all that. It wasn't an assembly issue. Any other comments?
My feeling is that with the relationship between PMC and the Borough Assembly, it all relates to the taxpayers, because the building, the hospital structure, is owned by the ratepayers, and if there was ever a financial situation that occurred where bankruptcy occurred at the hospital, the borough is going to be responsible for it. And I think all the information at some point is going to be public knowledge. So I think we should release it and start the dialogue.
And I would agree. This may not have been written in flowery language, but it reflected some concerns of a number of people, as the city manager said, and it provides the best possible background to try and understand the situation. And I would like to be as transparent as we possibly can be, recognizing that there may be a risk to that.
Well, I agree about the transparency, but I still have trouble with it starting out as opinions of one or two people, and it feels like it's been blown out totally out of context. So, can I abstain?
No. So, the motion is to release the document as presented to us. Is that correct, Kathy?
As written. Yeah.
As written. Any more discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
John Haverlet,
No.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
No.
John Hogue,
Yes.
Cindy Lakadakis.
Yes.
The motion to release the document fails. Takes 4 votes. It's 3 yes, 2 no, with members Lagadakis, Mayor Jensen, and Mayor Hogue, if I got the names right, voting in favor of release. So there we have it, Mr. Hogue.
Don't want to waste too much time. It's late. Would releasing a redacted version satisfy any of your concerns?
Well, I think we probably should release something, and I could go along more with the...
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we release the document that the lawyer has redacted.
We pay
As
him
a
a lot of
public
money.
document.
We might as well listen to him.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Hogue, seconded by Member Haverlick to release the redacted version of our document. Any discussion? Is this proper procedure? Can we make 2 motions on one issue? Okay, I thought it was. Clerk, call the roll.
John Haverlet,
Yes.
John Hogue,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Passes 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second,
Okay,
third,
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do you want
Meeting's
these back,
adjourned.
Kathy?